My daughter looked me straight in the eyes and said something I never thought I would hear in my
I know
lifetime.
what you did. Don't even try to deny it.
You never loved me, Mom. Not really. The words didn't just hurt, they shattered something inside me I didn't know could break.
I trusted you.
She was standing in my kitchen, her hands trembling, clutching a stack of papers I had hidden for over 30 years. Papers I thought I was protecting her with. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Because the truth, the whole truth, was something I had promised never to say. And now, it was too late. If this story touches you even a little, I'd love for you to like and subscribe. And please tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Most of all, share how you feel, because sometimes the hardest stories are the ones that need to be heard. I didn't sleep that night. After Lily walked out of my kitchen after those words, I stood there for a long time. My hands still resting on the edge of the counter, as if I could hold myself together by gripping something solid. But there was nothing solid left. Not in that room. Not in my chest. The house felt different after she left. Not quiet, no, it was louder than silence had any right to be. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the refrigerator, every distant car passing outside felt like a reminder that something had broken. Something I wasn't sure I could fix. Lily had always been strong. Even as a child, she had a kind of independence that made people admire her. Teachers used to tell me, "She's going to go far, Eleanor." And she did. Law school, a prestigious firm in Columbus, a life I had worked so hard to give her. But somewhere along the way, she stopped letting me in. It hadn't happened all at once. That's the thing about distance. It grows quietly, almost politely, until one day you realize you're standing on opposite sides of a canyon. I remember when she was 16. She had come home from school later than usual, her eyes red, her shoulders stiff. I was in the kitchen then, too. Funny how so many important moments happen in kitchens, chopping vegetables for dinner. "Everything okay?" I had asked, trying to keep my voice light. She dropped her backpack on the floor a little harder than necessary. "Yeah." "Fine." That was the first time I heard that word from her in that tone. Not fine. Closed. I didn't push. I never pushed. Maybe that was my first mistake. Instead, I said, "Dinner's almost ready, your favorite." She shrugged, already heading toward her room. "I'm not hungry." That night, I sat alone at the table staring at the plate I had made for her, watching the steam fade into nothing. At the time, I told myself it was just a phase. Teenagers pull away. They test boundaries. They become their own people. But Lily didn't just pull away. She built walls. Small things at first. She stopped telling me about her day. Then she stopped asking about mine. Phone calls became shorter. Conversations turned into exchanges of information instead of moments of connection. "Did you eat?" "Yeah." "Work okay?" "Fine." Always that word again. Fine. It started to feel like a door that was always closed just before I reached it. There were moments, rare, fleeting, when I thought I could still reach her. Like the night she came home after winning her first mock trial competition. She stood in the doorway holding that certificate, trying to look casual, but unable to hide the spark in her eyes. "I won," she said. I smiled so wide it hurt. "Of course you did." For a second, just a second, I thought she might step forward, let me hug her the way I used to when she was little. But instead, she nodded and walked past me. "I've got homework." And just like that, the moment was gone. I told myself not to take it personally. She was growing up. She was busy. She was becoming someone strong and capable. But deep down, there was a quiet fear that I never allowed myself to fully acknowledge. That she felt something missing. There were signs, if I'm honest. Questions she would ask always casually, always at the worst possible times. "Why don't I have baby pictures before age 1?" she asked once, flipping through an old photo album. My heart had stuttered, but I kept my voice steady. "We lost some things when we moved." She looked at me for a long moment. Not accusing, just searching. "Okay," she said, but I knew she didn't fully believe me. Another time she asked, "Did I look like you when I was a baby?" I laughed it off. "You had my stubbornness, that's for sure." She didn't laugh. Instead, she studied my face like she was trying to memorize it, or compare it to something she couldn't quite name. That was the moment I felt it most strongly. That gap between us. Not just emotional, but something deeper. Something I had spent years carefully covering like a crack in the wall that I kept painting over, hoping no one would notice. And I told myself I was protecting her. That was always the reason. Protecting her from confusion, from pain, from a truth that could complicate everything she believed about herself. But as the years passed, I began to wonder if my silence wasn't protecting her at all. Maybe it was isolating her. In college, the distance became more pronounced. She rarely came home unless she had to. Holidays felt like obligations rather than celebrations. She would sit at the table polite but distant, checking her phone more often than she looked at me. I would cook her favorite meals. I would ask about her classes, her friends, her life. She would answer, but never fully, always holding something back. And every time she left the house would feel emptier than before. Then came law school. That was when she truly became someone I struggled to recognize. Confident, sharp, guarded. She spoke with precision, like every word had been measured and approved before leaving her mouth. It made her brilliant in a courtroom, I'm sure. But as her mother, it felt like I was talking to someone who had already built a case against me and hadn't yet decided whether to deliver the verdict. The last few years had been the hardest. We saw each other less, talked even less. When she did come over, it was brief, controlled. She would stand in the living room instead of sitting. Keep her coat on like she was ready to leave at any moment. "Just checking in," she'd say. Checking in? Like I was something to be monitored, not someone to be loved. I tried. God knows I tried. I asked her once, not long ago, "Did I do something wrong?" She looked at me surprised, almost caught off guard. Then she shook her head. "No, Mom. You're fine." There it was again. Fine. But her eyes said something else. Something unresolved. Something aching. And now standing in that same kitchen hours after she had left those years replayed in my mind like scenes from a film I didn't want to watch. Every missed moment. Every unanswered question. Every silence I had chosen. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. Because for the first time, I allowed myself to ask the question I had been avoiding for decades. What if she was right? What if in trying to protect her, I had made her feel unloved? The thought was unbearable, and yet it wouldn't go away. I glanced toward the hallway, toward the room that used to be hers. I hadn't changed a thing in there. Not the bedspread, not the photos, not even the small crack in the wall near the window where she had once thrown a toy in frustration. I had kept it all, because to me, she had never left. But to her, maybe she had been gone for a long time, and I had been the last to realize it. There are memories you don't revisit unless something forces you to. That night, sitting alone at my kitchen table, staring at the empty chair, Where Lily had stood just hours earlier, I realized I could no longer outrun mine. Because everything she believed about me, every accusation, every piece of anger, had roots buried deep in a past I had spent decades trying to keep hidden. And whether I liked it or not, it was time to face it. I was 28 years old when I first saw her. Back then, I was working long shifts as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Columbus. It was the kind of job that didn't leave much room for anything else. 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer, nights that blurred into mornings, holidays that felt like any other day. I told myself I didn't mind. I had built a quiet life, predictable, safe. Or at least, that's what I believed until the night everything changed. It was late, close to midnight. The emergency department had that strange, uneasy calm that always made me more nervous than chaos. The kind of silence that felt like it was waiting for something to break. And then it did. A young woman was brought in, barely conscious, pale, trembling. She had been found outside a bus station, disoriented, bleeding, clutching a thin hospital blanket that clearly didn't belong to her. She was pregnant. Very pregnant. I remember the urgency in the room, the doctors moving quickly, voices sharp and focused. There was no time for questions, no time for paperwork, just action. I stayed by her side. That was my job, of course, but it was more than that. There was something about her, something fragile and terrified, that made it impossible for me to step away. She never told us her name. Every time someone asked, she would shake her head weakly or turn away. Her eyes were filled with something deeper than fear, something like shame, or maybe resignation. As if she had already decided that nothing about her story deserved to be known. The baby came early. Too early. I still remember the moment that tiny cry filled the room. It was faint, fragile, but it was there, and it cut through everything like a beam of light. A girl, small, delicate, fighting. I was the one who carried her to the neonatal unit. She fit so easily in my hands it terrified me, like something that could disappear if I held on too tightly or not tightly enough. "Stay with me," I whispered, though I wasn't even sure who I was talking to, her or myself. The mother didn't last long after that. Complications, blood loss, things that happen too quickly and too quietly in hospitals. By the time the sun came up, she was gone, and she left nothing behind. No name, no family, no records that meant anything. Just a baby, just Lily. For the next few days, I found myself going to the neonatal unit more often than I needed to. At first, I told myself it was routine, checking vitals, monitoring progress. But the truth was, I couldn't stay away. She was so small, so quiet most of the time. But when she cried, it wasn't weak, it was determined, like she was already fighting for a place in a world that hadn't made room for her. I would stand by her incubator, watching the rise and fall of her tiny chest, feeling something stir inside me that I hadn't expected. Something fierce, protective, terrifying. "She's a tough one," Dr. Helen Morris said to me one afternoon, glancing at the chart. I nodded. "She has to be." Dr. Morris studied me for a moment. "You've been spending a lot of time here." I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "She doesn't have anyone else." That was the truth. But it wasn't the whole truth. The hospital began the usual process. Social services got involved. There were forms, discussions, quiet conversations about foster care, about placement, about what happens next. I listened to all of it, but it felt distant. Because every time I looked at her, I couldn't imagine handing her over to strangers. I couldn't imagine her growing up without knowing that someone had chosen her. Really chosen her. The idea came to me slowly at first, then all at once. I remember sitting in the break room, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, thinking something that felt both impossible and undeniable. What if I took her? What if I became the one person in her life who never left? It sounded ridiculous. I was single. My salary was modest. My life was already stretched thin. But every logical reason not to do it felt smaller than the feeling that kept growing inside me. So I asked. The process wasn't easy. There were interviews, background checks, financial evaluations, endless paperwork. And then there were the questions. Why do you want to adopt this child? Are you prepared for the responsibility? There were interviews, background checks, financial evaluations, endless paperwork. And then there were the questions. Why do you want to adopt this child? Are you prepared for the responsibility? Do you understand the long-term implications? I answered all of them as honestly as I could. But the real answer, the one I never quite knew how to put into words, was simple. Because she needed someone, and somehow that someone had become me. Weeks passed, then months, and just when I thought everything was moving forward, something unexpected happened. I was called into a meeting with a lawyer I had never seen before. His name was Thomas Reed. He was polite, professional, carefully measured in everything he said. But there was something about the way he looked at me that made me uneasy. There are complications regarding the child's case, he said. Complications. That word again. My stomach tightened. What kind of complications? He folded his hands on the table. The child's biological father has been identified. The room felt smaller. Who is he? I asked. There was a pause, and in that pause, something shifted. Because I realized even before he said the name that this was not going to be simple. Not at all. His name is Richard Bennett. Thomas Reed said it calmly, as if he were reading from a file that meant nothing to him. But to me, the name landed like something heavy, something that carried weight I didn't yet understand. I frowned. I don't know who that is. Thomas gave a small, polite nod. That's not surprising. Mr. Bennett is a private individual, but he is also the biological father of the child. The room felt too still. I shifted in my chair, trying to process what he was saying. If he's the father, then why isn't he here? Another pause. Another careful look. Because he has chosen not to be, Thomas replied. Something sharp and hot rose in my chest. He has a daughter in the neonatal unit fighting to survive, and he chooses not to be here. Thomas didn't react to my tone. He simply opened a folder in front of him, revealing documents I couldn't yet see. Mr. Bennett is a prominent businessman, he continued. He has an established family, a wife, 2 children. His situation is complicated. Complicated. I let out a bitter breath. No, it's not. It's simple. He doesn't want her. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't take them back. Thomas closed the folder gently. He is willing to provide financial support, substantial support. However, he does not wish to be publicly connected to the child. There it was, the truth stripped of all its polite language. I felt my hands tighten in my lap. So, what happens now? Thomas leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering just enough to feel more personal, though I suspected it was rehearsed. That depends on you, Miss Gallagher. My stomach tightened. On me? Yes. Mr. Bennett has been informed of your interest in adopting the child. I blinked. How? The hospital reports, he said smoothly. Your involvement has been noted. Of course it had. I swallowed, trying to steady myself, and Thomas said, folding his hands again, he is willing to consent to the adoption, under certain conditions. The air seemed to thicken around me. What kind of conditions? Thomas held my gaze, this time no longer looking at his papers. You would become the child's legal mother in every sense. Full custody, full responsibility. That's what adoption means, I said quietly. Yes, he agreed, but there is more. I waited, and in that moment, I felt it, that shift again. That sense that whatever came next would change everything. He requires a legally binding agreement that you will never disclose his identity to the child. The words hung there, heavy, final. I stared at him, trying to understand. Never, never. My heart began to pound. What if she asks, you will not answer? What if she deserves to know? Thomas's expression didn't change. That is not part of the agreement. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it pressing down on me. A child's growing up without knowing where she came from, without knowing who she was, and me standing there, holding that truth, unable to share it. It felt wrong. It felt like building a life on something fragile. I don't understand, I said slowly. If he doesn't want her, why does it matter if she knows who he is? Thomas hesitated for the first time. Just a fraction. But I saw it. It matters, he said carefully, because of his current family, his reputation, his public standing. I let out a hollow laugh. So this is about protecting him. It is about protecting everyone involved, Thomas corrected. No, I said, shaking my head. It's about protecting him. Silence filled the room again, and in that silence, I felt something inside me harden, because suddenly, this wasn't just about paperwork or procedures anymore. This was about a man who had a daughter and chose to erase himself from her life, and now he wanted to erase the truth too. What happens if I don't agree? I asked. Thomas didn't hesitate this time. Then the adoption will not proceed under these terms. My chest tightened. What does that mean for her? It means, he said, his voice returning to that professional calm, that custody would likely be transferred through the standard system. Foster care. Possibly another adoptive family. The image hit me immediately. Lily, tiny, fragile Lily, being passed from one place to another. Growing up without stability, without someone who had been there from the very beginning. Without me. The thought was unbearable. She needs someone? I whispered more to myself than to him. Thomas didn't respond. He didn't need to, because he already knew what I was thinking. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to breathe through the storm building inside me. This wasn't a simple choice. It wasn't just about signing papers. It was about choosing a life for both of us. A life built on love, but also on silence. Could I do that? Could I look at her every day, knowing I was keeping something from her? Could I answer her questions with half-truths, or no truth at all? And yet, could I walk away? The answer to that came quickly. No. I opened my eyes again, meeting Thomas's gaze. What else? I asked. He seemed almost relieved by the question. There would be financial provisions, he said. A trust established for the child's education and future. Medical expenses covered. Legal protections to ensure the agreement is upheld. I barely heard him, because my mind was already somewhere else. Back in that neonatal unit, standing beside that incubator, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. She doesn't have anyone else, I said again, this time more firmly. Thomas nodded. That is correct. I took a deep breath, and then another, because I knew what I was about to say would shape everything that came after. I'll do it. The words came out quietly, but they felt louder than anything I had ever said. Thomas studied me for a moment, as if making sure I understood. You are agreeing to all terms. I hesitated, just for a second, because somewhere deep inside me, a voice whispered that this was wrong. That secrets like this don't stay buried forever. That one day she would ask, and one day she would look at me waiting for an answer I had promised never to give. But then I thought of her again. Alone, unclaimed, unchosen. I'm agreeing, I said. Thomas nodded once, already reaching for his pen. Then we will proceed. The meeting ended shortly after that. Papers were drawn up, signatures were placed. Legal language filled the spaces where emotion didn't belong. But as I walked out of that office, none of it felt real. Not yet. It only became real a few days later when I stood in the neonatal unit again. This time, not as a nurse, but as her mother. I reached into the incubator, my hands more careful than ever, and gently lifted her. She was still so small, still so fragile, but she was mine. "Hi," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm Eleanor." Her tiny fingers curled slightly, brushing against my skin. And in that moment, something settled inside me. A certainty, a promise. "I've got you," I said softly. "No matter what." I held her close, feeling the warmth of her against my chest. And I meant every word, even if it meant carrying a secret that would one day break us both. Raising Lily should have been the hardest part. That's what everyone told me. Late nights, financial strain, the exhaustion of doing everything alone, the fear of making mistakes. And yes, those things were real, but they weren't the hardest part. The hardest part was watching her slowly feel like she didn't belong, while knowing exactly why, and never being able to tell her. When I first brought her home, she fit into the crook of my arm like she had always been meant to be there. I remember standing in my small apartment, looking around at a space that had once felt sufficient, and realizing it suddenly felt too quiet, too empty, too unprepared for the life I had just taken responsibility for. So I adapted. I rearranged furniture, bought things I couldn't quite afford, learned how to balance hospital shifts with sleepless nights and early mornings. And through it all, she grew. Strong, curious, observant. Even as a toddler, Lily had a way of looking at the world like she was trying to understand something just beneath the surface. Other children played without question, but Lily she watched first. I used to tell myself she was just thoughtful. Now looking back, I wonder if she was already searching for something. Her first word wasn't mama, it was why. I laughed the first time she said it, not realizing how fitting it would become. Why is the sky blue? Why do people leave? Why don't I look like you? That last one came earlier than I expected. She was 5. We had been standing in line at a grocery store when a woman behind us smiled and said, "She's adorable. She doesn't look a thing like you, though." The woman meant no harm. It was one of those casual comments people make without thinking. But Lily heard it. Of course she did. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with those wide, searching eyes. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart." "Why don't I look like you?" My heart stopped for just a second. Not enough to show, not enough to panic, just enough to remind me of the promise I had made. I forced a small smile. "Families don't always look the same, honey." She frowned slightly. "But Emma at school looks like her mom." I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "And you look like you." That seemed to satisfy her for a while. But questions like that don't disappear. They grow. As she got older, the differences became harder to ignore. her dark hair against my lighter shade, the shape of her eyes, the way she carried herself, confident, almost defiant at times, so different from my quieter nature. People noticed. They always notice. Sometimes it was harmless curiosity. Other times it felt like judgment. Are you her aunt? Is she adopted? Where's her father? I learned how to smile through it, how to deflect, redirect, protect. But Lily noticed those moments too. She noticed the way I hesitated before answering, the way conversations shifted when she entered the room, the way certain questions were never fully answered, and slowly, quietly, she started to fill in the blanks herself. By the time she was 12, the questions had changed. They weren't curious anymore. They were pointed. Why don't you ever talk about my dad? I was washing dishes when she asked that. My hands froze in the water. He's not part of our lives, I said carefully. Why? I hesitated. Too long. I just told you, I replied, turning slightly away from her. He's not part of our lives. That's not an answer, she said, her voice sharper than I had ever heard it before. I turned back to face her, and for the first time I saw it clearly. That look, not confusion, suspicion. I'm trying to protect you, I said quietly. From what? She shot back. From the truth. From a man who chose reputation over you. From a story that would make you question everything. But I couldn't say any of that, so I said the only thing I could. From things you don't need to worry about. Her expression changed then. Something closed. Something important. I think I should get to decide what I need to worry about, she said. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because she was right. She should have had that choice. But I had taken it from her before she was even old enough to understand what it meant. From that moment on, the distance between us began to take shape. Not in dramatic arguments, not in sudden explosions, but in small, quiet ways. She stopped asking certain questions, stopped sharing certain thoughts, stopped looking at me like I had all the answers, and in their place, something else grew. Doubt. By the time she reached high school, it had turned into something heavier, resentment. I remember one evening when she came home later than usual, her face flushed, her eyes distant. Where have you been? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. With friends. Which friends? She shrugged. Does it matter? It matters to me. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Of course it does. Something in her tone made my chest tighten. What is that supposed to mean? It means, she said, dropping her bag onto the floor. You only care when it's convenient. That's not fair, I said quickly. Isn't it? She challenged. You won't tell me anything real about my life, but you want to know everything about mine. The words hit harder than she probably intended, or maybe she intended them exactly that way. I'm your mother, I said, my voice softer now. And I'm your daughter, she shot back. Don't I deserve the truth? Silence filled the space between us. Heavy, unavoidable. I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to tell her. But every time I got close, I saw the papers in my mind. The signature I had written, the promise I had made. A promise that didn't just affect me. A promise that could unravel everything. I've always done what's best for you, I said finally. She stared at me for a long moment, and then she shook her head. No, she said quietly. You've done what's easiest for you. That was the first time it truly broke something inside me, because I realized then that my silence didn't look like protection to her. It looked like indifference, and no matter how much love I had poured into her life, no matter how many nights I stayed up, how many sacrifices I made, if she believed I didn't love her, then none of it mattered. I stood there watching her walk away, her bedroom door closing with a quiet finality. And I felt it again. That same feeling I had pushed down for years. The fear that one day the truth I had buried would come back not to protect us, but to destroy everything between us. And now, standing in my kitchen years later, after she had finally found those papers, I realized that day had come. And I had no idea how to fix it. The first time Lily asked me directly, I knew everything had changed. Not just between us, but inside her. It was a Sunday afternoon. Quiet, still. The kind of day that used to feel peaceful when she was younger. We had just finished lunch, and I was clearing the dishes when I noticed she hadn't moved from her chair. She was watching me, not casually, not distracted, intently. "Mom," she said. There was something in her voice that made my hands pause in the sink. Yes, she didn't look away. "Am I even your real daughter?" The question didn't come out angry. That would have been easier. It came out calm, carefully controlled. And somehow, that made it so much worse. I turned slowly, drying my hands on a towel, just to give myself a second, just 1 second to breathe. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what she meant. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I mean exactly what I said." I forced a small smile, the kind I had used for years to soften things that couldn't be softened. "You're my daughter." "Of course you are." "That's not what I asked." The air shifted. Something invisible but undeniable. She stood up from the table, her chair scraping lightly against the floor. "Am I your biological daughter?" There it was. No space to hide. No room for half answers. My heart began to pound so loudly I was sure she could hear it. I had imagined this moment so many times over the years. Practiced what I might say, how I might say it. But now that it was here, every prepared word vanished. I started, then stopped. Because what could I say? Yes, and break a promise that had been legally and morally binding for decades? No, and lie to her face in a way that would fracture something deeper than trust. I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the woman she was becoming. Strong, intelligent, determined. She deserved the truth. But I had already decided years ago that I wasn't allowed to give it to her. "I'm your mother," I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. Her eyes hardened. "That's not an answer." "It is?" I insisted, though even I could hear the weakness in it. "No," she said, shaking her head. "It's not. It's what you always do. You say something that sounds like an answer, but it doesn't actually tell me anything." "That is not fair," I replied, though I felt the truth of her words settle uncomfortably in my chest. "Then tell me the truth," she said. 3 simple words. Tell me the truth. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the memory of that office of Thomas Reed sliding those papers across the table of my own signature at the bottom of that agreement, it all came rushing back. "You don't need to worry about this," I said, clinging to the only defense I had ever used. Her expression changed instantly. Not to confusion, not even to anger, to something colder. "Don't need to worry about it," she repeated. I could hear the disbelief in her voice now. "This is my life, Mom. I know that. Do you, she cut in sharply. "Because it feels like there's a part of it you're deliberately keeping from me." I took a step toward her. "I'm trying to protect you." "There it is," she said, letting out a short, humorless laugh. That word again. Protect. Her arms crossed over her chest, a barrier I had seen too many times before. "Protect me from what?" The truth. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because any answer I gave would lead to more questions and eventually to the one thing I had promised never to say. Do you even hear yourself? She continued. You keep saying you're protecting me, but all I feel is shut out. That's not what I want, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Then what do you want? She demanded. The question hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because what I wanted didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what I had already chosen. I want you to trust me, I said, finally. Her face went still. Completely still. Trust you, she echoed softly. Yes. For what she asked, for answers you won't give me. I felt something inside me begin to unravel. Lily. No, she said firmly, holding up a hand. You don't get to do that. Do what act like I'm the one being unreasonable? Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, precise, like every word had been carefully selected. I've spent years asking questions, she continued. Years trying to understand things that don't make sense, and every time I get close, you shut it down. I'm not shutting you down. Yes, you are. She snapped, the calm finally cracking. The sound echoed through the room. For a moment, we both froze, because this was new. Lily didn't raise her voice often. When she did, it meant something had been building for a long time. I'm not a child anymore, she said, her voice trembling now, not with weakness, but with emotion she was struggling to contain. You don't get to decide what I can and can't handle. I'm your mother, I said again, but the words felt thinner now, less certain. And I'm your daughter, she shot back, which means I deserve honesty. Silence fell between us, but this time it wasn't the quiet kind. It was charged, fragile, the kind that feels like it could shatter with one wrong word. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't allowed myself to fully see before. Pain. Not just curiosity, not just frustration. Pain. Deep, lingering, personal. And suddenly, I understood something I had been avoiding for years. This wasn't just about information. This was about identity, about belonging, about a part of herself she couldn't reach because I was standing in the way. I thought, she began, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. I thought maybe you just needed time. My chest tightened. But it's been years, she continued, and nothing changes. She shook her head slowly. I don't think you're protecting me, Mom. I swallowed hard. Then what do you think I'm doing? She looked at me for a long moment, and then she said the words that would stay with me long after she walked away. I think you don't trust me enough to tell me the truth. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. That's not true, I said quickly. But she didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she stepped back slightly as if creating distance, not just physically, but emotionally. Then prove it, she said. I couldn't, and we both knew it. Her shoulders dropped slightly, not in defeat, but in resignation, like she had reached a conclusion she didn't want to accept. Okay, she said quietly. Just that, okay. And somehow that single word felt heavier than everything that had been said before. Lily, I'm going to my room, she interrupted. She turned away before I could say anything else. Before I could try to fix something I didn't know how to fix. And just like that, the conversation ended. But the damage didn't. I stood there for a long time after she left, staring at the empty space where she had been. Because I knew even then that something had shifted. Something important. And once things like that shift, They don't always shift back. After that day, something in our house changed in a way I couldn't pretend not to see anymore. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse than that. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from distance. Lily stopped asking questions. At first, I thought that might be a good thing, that maybe she had accepted my boundaries or at least decided to let the subject rest. But it didn't take long to realize that wasn't what had happened at all. She hadn't stopped asking because she trusted me. She had stopped asking because she no longer believed I would ever answer. And that realization settled into my chest, like a weight I carried everywhere. We still lived in the same house back then, but it no longer felt like we shared the same space. She moved through it differently, more independently, more deliberately. Her door was closed more often than it was open. Her meals were taken at different times than mine. Conversations when they happened were brief and functional. Did you pay the electric bill? Yes. I'll be home late. Okay, that was the rhythm we fell into. A rhythm that felt less like a relationship and more like coexistence. I told myself it was temporary, that she would come back around, that she just needed space. But deep down, I knew something else was happening. She wasn't stepping away. She was pulling back. And there's a difference. Stepping away leaves room to return. Pulling back builds distance. Permanent distance. Around that time, I became more careful than I had ever been before. About everything. Especially the papers. The adoption documents, the legal agreement, the sealed records. All of it stayed locked inside a small steel safe I kept hidden in the back of my closet. It wasn't large. It didn't look important. But inside, it was the one thing that could undo everything I had spent years trying to hold together. I checked it more often than I'd like to admit. Sometimes once a week, sometimes more. Not because I thought someone would break in, but because I was afraid. Afraid that one day Lily would go looking, and that if she did, she wouldn't just find answers. She would find them without context, without explanation, without understanding why I had made the choices I made. And that terrified me more than anything. One evening, after she had gone out with friends, I found myself standing in front of that safe again. I hadn't planned to open it, but my hand moved almost on its own. The familiar click of the lock echoed louder than it should have in the quiet room. I opened the door slowly. Inside were the documents I had memorized over the years. The adoption certificate, the legal agreement with Richard Bennett's name printed in cold official letters, my own signature at the bottom. A promise made in ink that could never be undone. And then there was the envelope. Plain, white, unmarked except for one thing. My name, Eleanor Gallagher. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. I knew who it was from. I had known for years. Richard Bennett. The letter had arrived shortly after the adoption was finalized. I remembered the day it came. I had stood in my apartment, Lily asleep in the next room, staring at that envelope like it was something dangerous, something that could change everything. I never opened it. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. He had already made his decision. He had already walked away. What could he possibly say that would make a difference, so I locked it away, with everything else. And for years, I left it untouched. But now, standing there with the safe open and the weight of everything that had happened between Lily and me pressing down on me, I felt something different. Curiosity. No, not just curiosity. Need. Because for the first time, I wondered if that letter contained something I should have known. Something Lily should have known. My fingers hovered over the envelope. I could open it right now. No one would know. But then what? Would it help, or would it complicate things even more? I pulled my hand back, closed the safe, locked it again. Some things I told myself were better left buried, even if that belief was becoming harder to hold on to. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Lily's distance didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. She spent more time outside the house, more time with people I didn't know, more time building a life that didn't seem to include me. I tried in small ways to reach her. I left notes on the counter. "Dinner's in the fridge. Good luck on your exam. Proud of you." Sometimes she responded, a quick text. "Thanks. Got it." But it never went beyond that. No conversations, no shared moments. Just "Dinner's in the fridge. Good luck on your exam. Proud of you." Sometimes she responded, a quick text. "Thanks. Got it." But it never went beyond that. No conversations, no shared moments, just acknowledgments. One night, I knocked on her door. I hadn't done that in a while. There was a pause before she answered. "Yeah." "Can I come in?" Another pause. Then, "I guess." I stepped inside. Her room looked different. Cleaner, more organized, less personal. Like she had already started preparing to leave even though she hadn't said it out loud. I was thinking, I began trying to sound casual. "Maybe we could have dinner together tomorrow. Just us." She didn't look up from her laptop. "I'm busy." "Just for an hour," I said. "We haven't," I said. "I'm busy." Her tone wasn't harsh, but it was final. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say next. "Okay," I said quietly. I turned to leave. "Mom." I stopped, turned back. She was still looking at her screen. "I'm not a kid anymore," she said. "I know that. Then stop acting like I am." The words stung, not because they were loud, but because they were true in a way I didn't want to admit. "I'm just trying to spend time with you," I said. She finally looked up then, and the expression in her eyes. It wasn't anger. It was something colder. "You should have done that when I needed it," she said. I felt my breath catch. "I was always there," I whispered. She held my gaze for a moment longer. Then she shook her head. Not in the ways that mattered. And just like that, the conversation was over. Again. I left her room and closed the door behind me, the soft click echoing down the hallway. And as I stood there, staring at that closed door, I felt it more clearly than ever before. The distance, the silence, the truth I had locked away, sitting just a few feet from me, inside that safe, waiting. Because whether I was ready or not, I had the growing, undeniable feeling that Lily wasn't going to stop searching. And when she found what she was looking for, she wouldn't just question the truth. She would question me. And I didn't know if our relationship could survive that. The day Lily found the safe, I wasn't even home. That's the part that still haunts me the most. Not just that she found it, but that I wasn't there when she did. Because if I had been, maybe I could have explained. Maybe I could have softened the truth before it hit her all at once. Or maybe it would have only made things worse. I had gone to the grocery store that afternoon. Nothing unusual. Just another routine errand in a life that had become painfully predictable. I remember standing in the aisle comparing two brands of coffee like it actually mattered when I felt it. That strange, sudden unease, like something was wrong but I couldn't name it. I shook it off, paid for my groceries, drove home. But the moment I stepped inside the house, I knew. Something had changed. It was subtle. The air felt different, too still, too aware. "Lily!" I called out, setting the grocery bags on the counter. No answer. I walked further into the house, my footsteps slower now. Her shoes were by the door. Her coat was draped over the chair. She was home, but she wasn't answering. And then I saw it, the closet door, slightly open. My stomach dropped. I don't remember walking down the hallway. I don't remember pushing the door open. All I remember, and then I saw it, the closet door, slightly open. My stomach dropped. I don't remember walking down the hallway. I don't remember pushing the door open. All I remember is the safe. Open, wide open. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it, like it might somehow fix itself if I didn't move. Like if I didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't be real. But it was. The lock was undone. The door slightly ajar. And inside the documents were no longer in the neat, untouched stack I had left them in. They had been moved, handled, read. My heart began to pound so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Lily." I called again, my voice tighter now. Still no answer. I turned back toward the hallway, and that's when I saw her. She was standing in the living room, completely still, holding the papers. For a second, we just looked at each other. No words, no movement, just understanding. Because in that moment, I knew, she knew, and there was no going back. "Where did you get those?" I asked, though the answer was already obvious. Her hands trembled slightly, but her grip on the papers didn't loosen. "You're safe," she said. Her voice was flat, too calm. "I didn't know you had one," she added. I took a step toward her. "Lily, I can explain." Explain what she cut in. The question wasn't loud, but it hit like a slap. I stopped, because I didn't know where to begin. She looked down at the papers, flipping one over with a slow, deliberate motion. I read everything she said. My chest tightened. Every page she said. My chest tightened. Every paggy, every signature, every condition. She let out a short, hollow laugh. "You signed a contract about me." The way she said it, not as her life, not as her story, but as something, every signature, every condition. She let out a short, hollow laugh. "You signed a contract about me." The way she said it, not as her life, not as her story, but as something transactional. "That's not what it was," I said quickly. "Then what was it?" she demanded, her voice rising just slightly now. I opened my mouth, but again, nothing came out. Because how do you explain something like that? How do you take years of silence, of fear, of choices made under pressure, and turn them into something that makes sense in a single moment? "You adopted me," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "Yes," I whispered. The word felt small, insufficient, and you never told me. I was going to. "When?" she snapped. "After I found out myself." "That's not fair." "No, Mom," she said, shaking her head. "What's not fair is living your entire life thinking you understand who you are, only to find out it's all been hidden from you." Her voice broke slightly on the last word. Hidden. I took another step closer. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Then what were you trying to do? She asked. I hesitated, and that hesitation was all she needed. You weren't trying to do anything for me, she said quietly. You were protecting yourself. That's not true, I insisted. Then why didn't you tell me? She shot back. Because I made a promise. I said before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air, heavy, irreversible. Her eyes narrowed slightly. A promise to who I froze. Because now we were there, at the edge of everything, and one more step would change everything. I started. Of course you can't, she said, cutting me off. Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was something worse. Disappointed. I should have known, she continued. Even now, you still won't tell me the whole truth. I'm trying to protect you, I said again, though it sounded weaker this time, even to me. She stared at me for a long moment, and then she shook her head slowly. No, she said. You're protecting something else. My breath caught. Do you know what this looks like? She asked, holding up the papers. I didn't answer. It looks like you took me in because you had to, she said. That's not true. It looks like someone paid you to take me, she continued, her voice trembling now. Like I was some kind of obligation. Lily, no, I said, my voice breaking. That's no what happened. Then what did happen? It looks like someone paid you to take me, she continued, her voice trembling now. Like I was some kind of obligation. Lily, no, I said, my voice breaking. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? She demanded. I couldn't answer. Not fully, not honestly. And in that silence, she found her answer, or at least the one that made sense to her. You never loved me, she said quietly. The words hit harder than anything else she had said. Don't say that, I whispered. But it's true, isn't it? She pressed. You kept me because you had to, because it was part of some agreement. Tears burned in my eyes. I chose you. She laughed again, but there was no humor in it. No, she said. You signed for me. The distinction cut deeper than anything else, because to her, that's what it looked like. A transaction, not a choice. I spent my whole life thinking I meant something to you, she continued, her voice shaking now. Thinking I was wanted. You were, I said quickly. You are. But now she interrupted. She looked down at the papers again, then back at me. I don't know what I am anymore. The room felt like it was closing in, because this was exactly what I had tried to prevent. Not just the truth coming out, but the way it would come out. Broken. Incomplete. Misunderstood. I can explain everything, I said desperately. Then do it, she said. I opened my mouth. And then, nothing. Because the one thing she needed to hear was the one thing I had promised never to say. Her shoulders dropped slightly, not in anger, but in something much heavier. Acceptance. Yeah, she said quietly. That's what I thought. She folded the papers slowly, her hands still trembling. Then she placed them on the table between us, carefully, like they were something fragile or something final. I'm leaving, she said. My heart stopped. Lily, I need space, she added. Her voice was calm again. Too calm. I can't stay here right now. Please don't go, I whispered. She looked at me one last time, and in her eyes, I saw it. Not just anger, not just pain, but something far more dangerous. Disconnection. "I don't even know who you are anymore," she said. And then she turned and walked out the door. The house felt different after Lily left. Not just quiet, empty. There's a kind of silence that comes from being alone, and then there's the kind that comes from losing someone who is still alive. This was the second kind. I stood in the same spot long after the door closed behind her, staring at nothing, replaying her last words over and over again. "I don't even know who you are anymore." I didn't move, not for minutes, not for hours. Time blurred into something meaningless, because for the first time since I brought her home, I didn't know where she was. And worse than that, I didn't know if she was coming back. I tried calling her that night, once, twice, 5 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. "Lily, it's me, please, call me back." I kept my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. "I know you're upset. I understand why. Just let me know you're okay." No response. I sent a text, then another, then one more. Nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, the same couch where she used to fall asleep watching movies when she was younger, wrapped in a blanket that dragged along the floor because it was always too big for her. I could still see it, the way she used to lean against me, the way she used to trust me, and now she couldn't even stand to be in the same room. By morning, the fear had settled into something deeper. Not panic, something colder. What if she doesn't come back? The thought lodged itself in my chest and refused to leave. I called her again. Still nothing. By midday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called someone else. "Hi, Mrs. Turner," I said when the voice on the other end picked up. Mrs. Turner had been Lily's high school guidance counselor. She had always taken a special interest in her, saw something in her that I was proud of but didn't fully understand. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" I hesitated. "No," I admitted. "It's Lily. I think she might be with friends, but she's not answering my calls." There was a pause. "Have you tried Jenna?" she asked. Jenna. Lily's closest friend since high school. I hadn't thought of that. "Not yet," I said. "Try her," Mrs. Turner suggested gently. "And Eleanor, give her a little space. Sometimes they need that." Space. That word again. It felt different now, more permanent. "I will," I said quietly. "Thank you." I hung up and immediately dialed Jenna's number. It rang longer than I expected. Then finally, "Hello? Jenna, hi, it's Eleanor." "Oh, hi, Mrs. Gallagher." Her tone was polite, careful, which told me everything I needed to know. "You've heard from Lily, haven't you?" I asked. Another pause. "Yes," she admitted. Relief flooded through me so quickly it almost made me dizzy. "Is she okay?" She's with me," Jenna said. "She's safe." I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Can I talk to her?" The silence that followed was longer this time. "I don't think she wants to talk right now," Jenna said gently. Of course she didn't. "I understand," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Can you just tell her that I love her?" "I will. And that I'm here whenever she's ready. I'll tell her. Thank you." I ended the call, slowly staring at my phone as if it might somehow connect me to her through sheer will. But it didn't. Nothing did. Days passed, then a week. Lily didn't come home. She didn't call. She didn't respond to any of my messages, but I knew she was safe. Jenna kept that promise. Short texts. She's okay. She's staying with me. She just needs time. Time. It sounded so simple, but every hour that passed felt heavier than the last. Because time in this case wasn't healing anything. It was stretching the distance between us, making it harder to close. I went back to work, but I wasn't really there. Patients spoke, and I nodded. Colleagues asked questions, and I answered. But my mind was somewhere else. Always. With her. Wondering what she was thinking. What she was feeling. What version of me she was holding on to in her mind. The liar, the stranger. The woman who signed a contract instead of choosing her, that one hurt the most. Because no matter how much I tried to tell myself she was wrong, I understood why she saw it that way. One evening, after another long shift, I came home and stood in front of the safe again. It felt different now. Not just a place where I stored documents, but a place where I had stored the truth, and lost my daughter because of it. I opened it slowly. The papers were still there, but now they felt exposed, like they were no longer secrets, just evidence. Evidence of choices, of promises, of consequences. And then there was the envelope. Still unopened, still waiting. For years I unopened, still waiting. For years I had convinced myself it didn't matter. That whatever Richard Bennett had to say wasn't important. But now I wasn't so sure. Because Lily had read everything else. Everything except this. And maybe, just maybe, had convinced myself it didn't matter. That whatever Richard Bennett had to say wasn't important. But now I wasn't so sure. Because Lily had read everything else. Everything except this. And maybe, just maybe, this was the one piece I had been missing. The one piece that could change how she saw everything. Or at least help her understand. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. It felt heavier than it should have. Like it carried more than just paper inside. I stared at my name on the front. Eleanor Gallagher. Written by a man who had never held his daughter. Never heard her first word. Never watched her grow. And yet his presence had shaped her life in ways neither of us could escape. I should have opened this years ago, I whispered. But I hadn't. Because I had been afraid. Afraid of what it might say. Afraid of what it might change. But now, everything had already changed. I took a deep breath, and slowly, carefully, I opened the envelope. The paper inside the envelope was thicker than I expected, not like the official documents, not like contracts or forms. This was personal. I unfolded it slowly, my fingers trembling in a way they hadn't in years. And for a moment, I couldn't read. Not because the words weren't clear, but because I was afraid of what they might say. I took a breath and began. Eleanor, if you are reading this, then it means you chose to move forward with the adoption. The words were simple, direct, and already I took a breath and began. Eleanor, if you are reading this, then it means you chose to move forward with the adoption. The words were simple, direct, and already different from what I expected. I was told I could remain completely uninvolved, that everything could be handled quietly, cleanly, without disruption to my life. My chest tightened. Yes, that was exactly how Thomas Reed had presented it. But I don't want you to think that my absence means I don't care. I stopped reading. My eyes lingered on that line. Because for years I had believed the opposite. That his absence was the clearest proof of what he felt, or didn't feel. I swallowed hard and continued. The truth is, I am choosing distance because I am already failing one family. I will not destroy another. My brow furrowed. Failing one family. That wasn't what I had been told. My wife knows nothing about this. Neither do my children. If this becomes public, it won't just affect me. It will unravel their lives too. There it was. The explanation I had been given. Reputation, stability, protection. But then the letter continued. That doesn't make it right. I froze again, because I hadn't expected that, not from a man who had signed away his place in his child's life. There isn't a version of this where I am the good person. I know that. I will live with that. The words felt heavier now, more honest, more human than I had ever allowed him to be in my mind. But I need you to understand something. I leaned closer to the page. I am not walking away because she doesn't matter. My throat tightened. I am walking away because I am not the kind of man she deserves. The sentence sat there, quiet, unapologetic, and yet filled with something I hadn't expected. Regret. Deep, undeniable regret. I read the next lines more slowly. If you are reading this, it means you are the one raising her. And if that's true, then she is already better off than she would have been with me. A tear slipped down my cheek before I even realized it. Because in all these years, no one had ever said that. Not Thomas Reed, not the hospital, not even myself. I have arranged for financial support, not as a substitute for presence, but because it is the only thing I can offer without causing more harm. I let out a shaky breath, because suddenly that part, the money, the trust, the legal structure, it didn't feel as cold as it once had. It felt inadequate, like someone trying to compensate for something they knew they couldn't fix. There is one thing I ask of you. My heart began to pound again, because I already knew what that was. Please don't tell her who I am. I closed my eyes for a moment. Yes, that was the condition, the promise, the thing that had shaped everything. But then I opened them again and kept reading. Not because I don't want her to know. My breath caught, but because if she does, she will look for me. The room felt smaller, closer. And if she finds me, I don't know if I will be strong enough to stay away. The words blurred slightly as tears filled my eyes. And if I don't stay away, I will destroy everything I've built, including the life she is supposed to have with you. My hands trembled now, because this wasn't the man I had imagined. This wasn't someone cold or careless. This was someone afraid. You may hate me for this. You may think I am selfish. You may be right. A small, broken laugh escaped me, because I had thought exactly that for years. But I am asking you to be stronger than I am. I pressed my lips together, trying to steady my breathing. Let her have a life that isn't complicated by my failures. The sentence echoed in my mind, over and over. Failures. Not absence, not rejection, failures. If one day you decide to tell her I won't stop you, I don't have that right. My eyes widened slightly, because that wasn't what I had been told. Not at all. But if you cannot absence, not rejection, failures. If one day you decide to tell her I won't stop you, I don't have that right. My eyes widened slightly, because that wasn't what I had been told. Not at all. But if you can, if you believe it's better for her, let her believe her life began with you. My chest tightened painfully, because that was exactly what I had tried to do. And if she ever asks about me, I held my breath. Tell her I wasn't brave enough. The words hit harder than anything else in the letter. Not cruel, not defensive, just honest. Painfully honest. The final lines were shorter, quieter. Thank you for giving her something I couldn't. Richard Bennett. I lowered the letter slowly, my hands still shaking. The room was silent again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was different, heavier, but clearer, because for the first time I understood. Not just what had happened, but why. And more importantly, what I had misunderstood. For years, I had believed I was protecting Lily from a man who didn't want her. But that wasn't the full truth. He had step-ped away, not because she didn't matter, and more importantly, what I had misunderstood. For years, I had believed I was protecting Lily from a man who didn't want her. But that wasn't the full truth. He had stepped away not because she didn't matter, but because he believed he would only make things worse if he stayed. Was he right? I didn't know. But it changed everything. Because the story Lily had read in those papers was incomplete. It showed the agreement, the conditions, the silence, but it didn't show this. The hesitation, the regret, the choice not to claim her, but also not to harm her. I pressed the letter against my chest, closing my eyes. Lily, I whispered, because now I had something I didn't have before. The truth. Not just the legal truth, not just the surface, but the whole complicated, imperfect truth. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to bring her back. If she was willing to listen. I didn't wait until morning. I didn't wait until I felt ready, because I knew something now that I hadn't known before. Waiting had already cost me too much. I grabbed my keys, the letter still in my hand, and walked out the door before I could second-guess myself. The drive to Jenna's house felt longer than it actually was. Every red light stretched into something unbearable. Every second gave my thoughts more room to spiral. What if she refuses to see me? What if she won't listen? What if I'm already too late? I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. No, I whispered to myself. Not this time. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't going to stay silent. When I pulled into Jenna's driveway, my heart was racing so fast it almost hurt. The house looked calm, normal, like nothing had changed. But I knew better. I stepped out of the car, the evening air cool against my skin, and walked up to the front door. For a moment, I just stood there, hand raised, hesitating, because this was the moment everything could either begin to heal or break completely. I knocked. Soft at first, then again, a little knocked. Soft at first, then again, a little louder. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. Jenna stood there, her expression cautious. Mrs. Gallagher, I need to see her, I said. My voice unsteady but firm. She hesitated. I don't think louder. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. Jenna stood there, her expression cautious. Mrs. Gallagher? I need to see her, I said. My voice unsteady but firm. She hesitated. I don't think, please, I interrupted gently. I won't force anything. I need a chance to explain. Jenna studied my face for a moment, and I think she saw it. The difference, the urgency, because after a few seconds, she stepped aside. She's upstairs, she said quietly, but I don't know if she'll. I understand, I replied. I walked in slowly, my heart pounding with every step. The house smelled faintly of coffee and something warm, familiar, comforting. But I couldn't focus on any of it. All I could think about was her. I reached the bottom of the stairs, and for a moment, I almost turned back. Because fear has a way of making you believe it's safer to avoid the truth. But I had done that for too long. I couldn't do it again. So I climbed the stairs, one step at a time, until I stood in front of a closed door. Her door. I raised my hand, knocked. No answer. Lily, I called softly. Silence. I swallowed hard. I know you're in there. Still nothing. I took a breath. I read the letter. The words hung in the air, and then a sound. Movement. The door opened slowly. Lily stood there. Her eyes were tired, red, like she hadn't been sleeping much. But what struck me the most was the way she looked at me. Not with anger, not even with pain, but with distance. Why are you here? She asked. Her voice was flat, controlled. I need to talk to you, I said. You've had years to do that, she replied. I nodded. I know. That seemed to catch her off guard, just slightly, because I didn't argue. I didn't deflect. I should have told you sooner, I continued. Her expression didn't change. It's a little late for that, she said. I know, I repeated. There was a pause, a long one. Then she stepped back slightly. 5 minutes, she said. It wasn't an invitation. It was a limit, but it was enough. I stepped into the room. She didn't sit, so neither did I. We stood there, facing each other, with more distance between us than the size of the room could explain. I was wrong, I said. The words came out before I could stop them, because they were true. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. About what she asked. About keeping this from you, I said. About thinking I was protecting you. She crossed her arms. That's what you always say. I know, I said, but this time, I can explain why. She didn't respond, but she didn't interrupt either. So I continued. I read something today, I said, holding up the letter. Her eyes flickered briefly toward it. What is that? She asked. It's from him. That got her attention. Richard Bennett? She asked, her voice tightening slightly around the name. Yes. She stared at the letter for a moment longer. Then, back at me. And you're just now reading it? She asked. I nodded. I was afraid to before. Of what she asked? The truth, I admitted. She let out a quiet, almost disbelieving breath. Funny, she said. That seems to be a pattern. I didn't argue, because she wasn't wrong. I should have opened it years ago, I said, and I should have told you everything. Then do it now, she said. I took a step closer. Not too close, just enough. He didn't leave because you didn't matter, I said. Her expression hardened slightly. That's not what the papers say. I know, I replied, but they don't say everything. I held out the letter. He wrote this. She hesitated, then slowly she took it. Her fingers brushed against mine for just a second, and even that small contact felt like something fragile, something uncertain. She unfolded the paper carefully and began to read. I watched her face as her eyes moved across the page. At first, nothing, just concentration. Then, something shifted. Her brows furrowed slightly. Her lips parted, and then she blinked, like she hadn't expected what she was seeing. I stayed quiet, let her read, because for once the truth wasn't coming from me. It was coming from somewhere else, somewhere she might trust more. When she reached the end, her hands were trembling, just like mine had been. She lowered the letter slowly and looked at me. This is real. Somewhere she might trust more. When she reached the end, her hands were trembling, just like mine had been. She lowered the letter slowly and looked at me. This is real, she asked. Yes. He wrote this. Yes. There was a long pause, and then she looked back down at the paper. He said, he wasn't brave enough, she murmured. I nodded. Yes. Her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not resentment, something more complicated. Why didn't you show me this before, she asked? The question was quiet, but it carried everything. Because I didn't know, I said. She looked up sharply. What do you mean I never read it? I admitted. Her expression shifted again. Confusion now. You had this the whole time, she asked. Yes. And you didn't open it? No. Why? I took a breath, because I thought I already knew the truth. She stared at me, and for the first time in days, I saw something change in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but something less certain than before. And you were wrong, she asked. Yes, I said, softly. There was a long silence. Then she looked back down at the letter again, reading parts of it over, processing, trying to fit this new piece into everything she thought she understood. And for the first time since she walked out of that house, I felt something shift. Not completely, not all at once, but slightly, like a crack of light through something that had been closed for too long. Lily didn't speak for a long time after finishing the letter. She just stood there, holding it in both hands, reading certain lines again, like she didn't trust what she had just seen the first time. I didn't interrupt. I didn't move. Because I knew this moment didn't belong to me. It belonged to her, to everything she was trying to rebuild in her mind. Finally, she exhaled slowly and lowered the letter. This doesn't change everything, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. I know, I replied. She looked at me then, searching my face for something. For years you let me believe, she paused, choosing her words carefully, that there was nothing more to the story. My chest tightened. I didn't know there was more, I said softly. You had this. She held up the letter slightly. You had something. And you didn't even look at it. I was afraid I admitted. Of what she asked again, but this time her tone wasn't sharp. It was curious. Of being wrong, I said. She frowned slightly. I built a version of the truth in my head. I continued. One that made it easier to justify my choices. If I opened that letter, I risked breaking that version. And that mattered more than me knowing, she asked. The question wasn't accusatory. It was honest, and that made it harder to answer. At the time, I said carefully, I thought protecting you meant controlling what you knew. She shook her head slightly. That's no tea protection, she said. That's control. At the time, I said carefully, I thought protecting you meant controlling what you knew. She shook her head slightly. That's not protection, she said. That's control. I see that now, I said. There was a pause. She looked down again at the letter, her thumb brushing lightly over the words. He said he wasn't brave enough, she murmured. Yes. Do you believe that? She asked. I hesitated, then nodded. I do. She let out a slow breath. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I don't think it's supposed to make it better, I said. I think it's just the truth. She looked at me again. And what about you? She asked. What about me? Were you brave enough? She pressed. The question hit deeper than I expected, because it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me, about the years of silence, the secrets, the choices. I thought I said, quietly. Her expression didn't change. But I wasn't, I added. That got her attention. I was brave enough to take you in, I continued, to love you, to raise you, but I wasn't brave enough to tell you everything. The room felt still again. But you loved me, she asked. The question came out so quietly it almost broke something inside me. Yes, I said immediately. No hesitation this time. I loved you the moment I held you, I continued. And I never stopped. Not for a second. She held my gaze, searching, measuring, trying to decide if she believed me. Then why does it feel like everything was a lie, she asked. Because I left out a part of the truth, I said. And sometimes that's enough to make everything else feel false. She looked away, her jaw tightening slightly. I don't even know who I am anymore, she said. The words were softer now, more vulnerable. And that scared me more than her anger ever had. You're still you, I said gently. She shook her head. No, I'm not. I thought I knew where I came from, who I belonged to. You belong to me, I said instinctively. Her eyes snapped back to mine. That's not what I'm asking, she said, and I realized then she wasn't questioning love. She was questioning identity. I don't know who my father is, she said. The words hung in the air, and this time I didn't deflect. I didn't hesitate. His name is Richard Bennett, I said. She swallowed hard. You've said that before, she replied. I know, I said. But I never told you more than that. She waited, so I continued. He's a businessman. He had a family already when you were born. A wife, children, a life he didn't want to risk losing. Her expression tightened. So he chose them over me. Yes, I said. She nodded slowly. At least that part made sense, but not because you didn't matter, I added. She didn't respond, so I kept going. He thought staying away would cause less damage than being involved, I said. And you believe that, she asked. I believe that's what he told himself, I replied. She let out a breath. That's convenient. Yes, I said. It is. There was a long pause. And you agreed to all of this? She asked. I agreed to raise you, I said, to give you a life that was stable, safe, and silent, she added. I nodded. Yes. She looked down again at the letter. I don't know what to do with this, she admitted. You don't have to decide anything right now, I said gently. But I do, she said, because this changes everything. Only if you let it define everything, I replied. She frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means this is part of your story, I said, but it's not all of it. She didn't look convinced. For 20 years, you've built a life, I continued. Your relationships, your choices, your identity. None of that disappears because of this. But it feels like it does, she said. I know, I said softly, and I did, because I could see it in her eyes. The way everything she thought she understood was shifting, unsettling, rearranging. I wish I had told you sooner, I said. She didn't respond. I wish you didn't have to find out this way, I added. Still nothing. I wish I had been braver, I finished. That made her look up again. Why now? She asked. Because I almost lost you, I said. The truth landed between us, raw, unfiltered. And that scared you? She asked. Yes, more than the truth, she pressed. I nodded. Yes. There was a long silence after that, but this one felt different, less sharp, less hostile, not healed, not even close, but shifting, like something that had been frozen was starting to move again. I'm still angry, she said finally. I know, and I don't trust you right now. I understand, and I don't know if I can just move past this. I'm not asking you to, I said. She studied me for a moment, as if she was trying to find something hidden in my words. But this time, there wasn't anything hidden, just the truth. I need time, she said. I nodded. You can have as much time as you need. She looked down at the letter one more time, then carefully folded it. I'm keeping this, she said. You should, I replied. She walked past me toward the door, then paused, not turning around, but not leaving either. I don't know what happens next, she said. Neither do I admitted. Another pause, then quietly. But I'm not done talking yet. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something I hadn't felt in days. Hope, small, fragile, but real. I'll be here, I said, and for the first time since she walked away. That didn't feel like an empty promise. The days after that conversation didn't magically fix anything. There were no sudden hugs, no tearful apologies that erased the years between us. Healing, I learned, doesn't arrive like a storm. It comes quietly, slowly, almost so gently you don't realize it's happening at first. Lily stayed at Jenna's for another 3 days. But this time, it felt different. She texted me. Not long messages, not emotional ones, but they were there. I'm okay. I'll come by tomorrow to get some things. Don't worry. Simple. But they meant something. They meant she hadn't closed the door completely. And for now, that was enough. The next afternoon, she came back to the house. Not to stay, just to pick up a few things. I heard the door open while I was in the kitchen. For a second, I froze. Because even though I had been waiting for this moment, I wasn't sure how to act when it actually came. Footsteps. Familiar. Careful. I turned slowly. And there she was, standing in the doorway. Not as distant as before, but not fully present either. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. The word felt fragile, like it could break if handled too roughly. She walked past me toward the hallway. I'm just grabbing some clothes, she said. Okay. I wanted to say more, ask more, But I didn't, because I had learned something important. Pushing too hard only made her pull away. So I let her move at her own pace. A few minutes passed. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to organize things that didn't need organizing, until she came back, holding a small bag. She hesitated in the doorway again, as if she was deciding whether to leave or stay just a little longer. "I've been thinking," she said. My heart tightened. "So have I," I replied. She nodded slightly. "I don't think I want to meet him," she said. The words came out unexpectedly, but they didn't shock me. Not after everything. "Okay," I said gently. She looked at me, almost surprised. "You're not going to try to convince me otherwise?" "No," I said. "It's your choice." She studied my face, making sure I meant it, and this time I did. I don't think it would help," she continued. "At least not right now." "That makes sense," I said. She shifted her weight slightly. "But I do want to understand more," she added. I felt something loosen inside my chest. "Anything you want to know," I said. "Even the parts you don't want to talk about?" she asked. "Yes." She held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." There was another pause. Then she walked a little further into the kitchen. Closer this time. Not fully close, but closer than before. "I keep thinking about something he wrote," she said. "Which part?" She glanced down briefly, as if recalling the exact words. "Let her believe her life began with you." My chest tightened. "Yes," I said softly. She looked back up. "Did you believe that she asked?" I hesitated. "Not exactly," I said. "But I wanted it to feel that way for you." "Why?" "Because I thought it would make things simpler," I admitted. She shook her head slightly. "It didn't," she said. "I know," I replied. There was no point pretending otherwise. "It made things feel incomplete," she continued, "like there was something missing even if I couldn't name it." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." She didn't respond right away. Then, quietly, "I think I always knew." The words surprised me. "You did?" I asked. She nodded. "Not consciously, but something always felt different." "In what way?" She shrugged slightly. "I don't know. It's hard to explain. Just a feeling." I nodded, because sometimes feelings didn't need explanations. "I wish you had told me," she said. "I know." "Even if it was messy," she added. "I was afraid of that mess," I admitted. "And now?" she asked. "Now I realize avoiding it just made it worse." She let out a small breath. "Yeah." There was a quiet understanding between us now. Not complete, not perfect, but real. And that mattered more. "I've also been thinking about you," she said suddenly. "Me?" She nodded. "You said you chose me." "I did. Even with everything, the contract, the conditions?" "Yes," I said firmly. She studied me again. "You could have said no?" she said. "Yes, but you didn't." "No." "Why?" The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. "I don't know if I can explain it in a way that makes sense," I said. "Try," she said. I took a breath. "Because when I saw you, nothing else mattered." Her expression softened slightly. "I didn't see a contract," I continued. "I didn't see conditions. I saw you." She didn't look away this time, and I knew I wasn't going to walk away. I said, There was a long silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was processing. I want to believe that, she said finally. You can take your time, I replied. She nodded. I think I need to. That's okay. Another pause. Then she looked around the kitchen, at the familiar space, at the life we had built together. I don't want to stay at Jenna's forever, she said. Hope flickered inside me. You don't have to, but I'm not ready to come back completely either, she added. I understand. She looked back at me. So maybe I could come by more often. I'd like that, I said. And we could talk, she continued. Not all at once, but little by little. I'd like that too. She nodded, then adjusted the strap of her bag. I should go, she said. Okay. She walked toward the door, then paused, turned back slightly. Mom! The word hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. Yes, she hesitated, then said quietly, I'm still angry. I know, but I'm also trying. My throat tightened. Thank you, I said softly. She gave a small nod, then turned. And this time, when she walked out the door, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. The first time Lily stayed for dinner again, it didn't feel like a reunion. It felt uncertain, like we were both stepping into something fragile, unsure of where to place our feet. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen just like she had a few days earlier, but this time she didn't hold a bag. She wasn't leaving. At least, not right away. I brought wine, she said, holding up a bottle. I smiled, a little surprised. You didn't have to do that. I know, she said. I wanted to. That small difference mattered. More than she probably realized. I gestured toward the counter. You can put it there. She walked in slowly, setting the bottle down with care, her eyes moving around the kitchen like she was seeing it differently now. Or maybe more clearly. I forgot how small this place feels, she said. I laughed softly. It always felt bigger when you were little. That's because I was smaller, she replied. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Almost. I turned back to the stove, stirring the pot I had been pretending not to watch for the past 10 minutes. Your favorite, I said. She leaned slightly to look inside. Still making this, she asked. Of course. She nodded, but didn't say anything else. We moved around each other carefully, not awkward exactly, but aware. Like every movement, every word carried more weight than it used to. When we finally sat down at the table, there was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just new. I used to hate this table, she said suddenly. I looked up surprised. You did? Yeah, she said, picking up her fork. It felt like every serious conversation happened here. I smiled faintly. That's because it did. She let out a small breath. Yeah. Another pause, then she took a bite of her food, and for a second she closed her eyes. Okay, she said quietly. This is still really good. Something inside me softened. Thank you. We ate in silence for a few minutes, but this time it didn't feel like distance. It felt like space, the kind you leave for something to grow. I went back to my apartment today, she said after a while. You did? She nodded. I haven't been there much lately. I didn't ask why. I let her continue. It felt strange, she said. Like I didn't belong there either. My chest tightened. Sometimes when things change, it takes a while to feel settled again, I said. She nodded slowly. Yeah, She set her fork down, her fingers resting lightly against the edge of the table. "I've been thinking a lot about identity," she said. I listened. "About what makes someone who they are." She continued. "Is it where they come from? Who raised them? The choices they make?"
"All of it," I said softly. She looked at me. "I used to think it was simple," she said, "that I could point to things and say, 'This is why I am the way I am.' And now I asked."
"Now it feels complicated."
I nodded.
"Because it is." She studied my face. "You don't seem as afraid of that anymore." I smiled faintly. "I think I spent a long time trying to make things simple," I said, "even when they weren't. And now I think it's okay for things to be complicated." She let that sit for a moment, then nodded. "I think I'm starting to understand that." There was another pause. Then she reached for the wine bottle. "Do you mind?" she asked. "Not at all." She poured a small glass for herself, then hesitated. "Do you want one? I probably shouldn't," I said, with a soft smile. "But I appreciate the offer." She nodded and took a small sip, then looked at me again. "I read the letter again," she said. "Okay, I think I understand him a little better," she added. I didn't interrupt. "But I don't forgive him," she continued. "That's your choice, and I don't know if I ever will. That's okay too." She watched me carefully. "You're not trying to defend him." "No." "Why not?" "Because this isn't about him," I said. "It's about you." Her expression shifted slightly. "About what you feel, what you need, what you decide." She nodded slowly. "I appreciate that." We finished dinner slowly, talking more than we had in a long time. Not about everything, not all at once, but enough. Enough to feel like we were moving somewhere. Afterward, she helped me clean up, something she hadn't done in years. We stood side by side at the sink, passing dishes back and forth. It was such a small thing, but it felt meaningful. "I miss this," she said quietly. I looked at her. "Me too." She dried her hands and turned to face me. "I don't think things will ever be exactly the same," she said. "I don't think they should be," I replied. She tilted her head slightly. No, I said, "because now we know more about each other, about ourselves." She considered that, then nodded. "Yeah." There was a long pause. Then she stepped a little closer. "Not all the way, but closer than before." "I'm still working through things," she said. "I know, but I don't feel like I have to do it alone anymore." My throat tightened. "You never did," I said softly. She looked at me for a long moment, and then slowly, she reached out, just enough to touch my hand. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. And it meant everything. "I'm glad you came to Jenna's," she said. "Me too. I don't think I would have come back if you hadn't." The truth of that settled deeply inside me. "Then I'm glad I didn't wait," I said. She gave a small smile. And for the first time in a long time, it reached her eyes. "I should go," she said after a while, "but I'll come back tomorrow." Hope flickered again. "I'll be here. I know." She picked up her things and walked toward the door. But this time, she didn't feel like she was leaving. She felt like she was returning. Step by step, moment by moment.
And as the door closed behind her, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe before. We weren't just fixing what was broken. We were building something new, something stronger, something honest. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The morning Lily moved back in didn't feel dramatic. There were no speeches, no emotional declarations, just a quiet knock on the door and the sound of something being carried back into place. I opened it to find her standing there with 2 bags and a look I couldn't quite read. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. There was a pause. Then she lifted one of the bags slightly. I figured I should probably stop living out of a suitcase. A small smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "I think that's a good idea." She nodded, then stepped inside. Just like that. No ceremony, no announcement, but somehow it felt bigger than anything we could have said. The house felt different again. Not like before, not like when she left, but something new, something shared. We fell into a rhythm slowly, not the old one. We didn't pretend nothing had happened. We didn't avoid the hard things, but we also didn't rush them. Some nights we talked, really talked, about the past, about the letter, about the questions she still had, and there were still many. Other nights we didn't. We just sat in the same room, watched something on TV, or worked in quiet companionship, and that was enough too. One evening, about 2 weeks after she moved back in, she came into the kitchen while I was making tea. "I've been thinking about something," she said. I turned to face her. "What is it?" She leaned against the counter, her arms loosely crossed. "I don't hate him," she said. The words surprised me, not because I expected hatred, but because she had never said it out loud before. "Okay," I said gently. "I don't forgive him either," she added. "That's okay." She nodded. "But I don't think I need to decide that right now. That's wise." She looked at me. "And I don't think I need to meet him to understand who I am." I felt something settle inside me. Relief, but also respect. Because this was her decision, her process, her story. "I think who I am has more to do with how I was raised," she continued. My throat tightened. "And who raised you?" I asked softly. She held my gaze. "You did." The simplicity of it nearly undid me. "I made mistakes," I said quietly. "I know," she replied, "but you stayed." The words hit deeper than anything else. Because in the end, that was what mattered most. "I did," I said. "And you loved me," she added. "Yes. Even when you got it wrong." I let out a small, shaky breath. "Especially then." She smiled slightly. Not wide, not perfect, but real. And that was enough. "I think I'm starting to understand something," she said. "What's that?" "That love isn't always clean," she replied. "Sometimes it's messy, complicated, even painful." I nodded. "Yes, it is, but it's still love," she said. "Yes." There was a quiet moment between us. Then she pushed off the counter. "I'm going for a walk," she said. "Okay, do you want to come?" The question caught me off guard, but I didn't hesitate. "I'd like that." We stepped outside together, the evening air cool and calm. The neighborhood was quiet, familiar, but it felt different walking through it now. Like we were seeing it with new eyes. We didn't talk much at first, just walked side by side. But it didn't feel empty. It felt different walking through it now. Like we were seeing it with new eyes.
We didn't talk much at first, just walked side by side. But it didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. After a while, she spoke again. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" I said. "Adopting me?" I stopped walking, turned to face her. "No," I said immediately. "Never." She studied my face, making sure. "Not even with everything that happened. Especially not," I said. She nodded slowly, then looked ahead again. "I'm glad," she said quietly. We kept walking, and as we did, I realized something. We hadn't erased the past. We hadn't fixed everything. But we had done something just as important. We had faced it together. And that was enough to move forward. When we got back to the house, she paused at the door, then turned to me. "Mom?" "Yes." She hesitated for just a second, then stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. It was intentional. I held her tightly, my heart aching in the best possible way. "I love you," she said softly. Tears filled my eyes. "I love you too." It wasn't forced. It was intentional. I held her tightly, my heart aching in the best possible way. "I love you," she said softly. Tears filled my eyes. "I love you too." And for the first time in a long time, those words didn't feel fragile. They felt strong, solid, true. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything had been tested and still remained. After everything we've walked through in this story, one truth stands out clearly. Love is not defined by perfection, but by presence, honesty, and the willingness to grow. Eleanor believed she was protecting her daughter by hiding the truth, but in doing so, she unintentionally created distance. Lily believed she was unloved, when in reality, she had been chosen deeply and deliberately from the very beginning. Their pain came not from a lack of love, but from a lack of shared truth. This story reminds us that silence, even when well-intentioned, can create misunderstanding. And sometimes, the hardest thing we can do is also the most necessary to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it risks changing everything. But it also teaches us something hopeful, that relationships can heal, that trust can be rebuilt, that even after years of distance, people can find their way back to each other if they are willing to listen, to understand, and to try again. If you've ever experienced something similar, misunderstanding, distance, or even pain within your own family, I'd love to hear your story. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story touched your heart. Because sometimes the stories we share help someone else feel a little less alone.